Well, it's a back-to-back bad news cycle for Donald Trump and a great news cycle for President Joe Biden with respect to both polling and fundraising, and Fox News is forced to talk about it, which means so are we. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert buttons before you go. I greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we have several clips to look at, several of them from the Fox Propaganda Network. And again, as always, there's a bit of schadenfreude here, right? Obviously, they are an unapologetically and openly pro-Trump, pro-Republican news network. And given the admittedly complicated news and polling surrounding President Biden, much of it negative, it's great to see when they actually have to talk about bad news for Donald Trump. So I have several clips I want to play. Let's watch Harris Faulkner and Peter Doocy deliver bad news for Trump and great news for America.
New poll finds Joe Biden is up 6 points in a hypothetical head-to-head rematch against Donald Trump. That's since December. Biden also has won over the majority of female voters at this point, independents and voters with college degrees.
Great news. Peter Doocy as well, President Biden's frequent nemesis in the White House briefing room and on the, Air Force One tarmac, a guy who he called a stupid SOB at one point. He's also talking about this Quinnipiac poll.
Quinnipiac has Biden up on Trump 6 points, 50-44. The Biden team has been trying to pivot to general election mode. They've been focusing on abortion access and on union jobs. And the Trump team has spent the last week or so dealing with his legal issues.
That's a bit of an understatement. Those legal issues will continue to follow Donald Trump like a bad cloud. We're going to get away from Fox News for just a moment. This is CNN, again, breaking down some of the particularly bad numbers for Trump and the particularly good numbers for President Biden.
But there's two things in particular that I think are worth noting. Number one, independent voters broke for Joe Biden in this poll 52-40. That's a 12-point lead. That is significant. And also with women, women support Biden by 58%. That's up. He has a 22% advantage with women, up from 12-point margin just a month ago. Those are both really significant numbers in deciding factors.
Deciding factors. That's the key statement right there, because Donald Trump has obviously won both the New Hampshire Republican primary, the Iowa caucus. He's probably going to win the South Carolina primary as well, right? But we're talking about a primary election. The Republican Party is, for all intents and purposes, an authoritarian cult of personality. So it's not exactly a surprise that Donald Trump is sweeping the Republican primary. But as I've talked about in previous videos, and as Nikki Haley is frequently talking about, and we'll play clip from her in just a second. That's just step one. Donald Trump has to win the primary, but then he has to win the general election. You don't become president simply by winning your party's primary. You have to win a general election when you have to appeal to a wider range of voters. And Donald Trump has always struggled in that respect. To be very clear, he struggled in 2016 with it. He struggled in 2020. And he's struggling even more here, at least according to the polling. And that's up against, again, President Biden, who has his own popularity and polling issues. If Trump wants to win, he can't just appeal to the MAGA base. And this is the mentality that Republicans struggle with, because Republican politicians and conservative commentators tend to be quite narcissistic. It's all about what appeals to the conservative voter. And that's why I always get frustrated, because reporters correctly ask President Biden and Democratic politicians, what are you going to do to appeal to Republican voters, independent voters, conservative voters? But the question is very rarely flipped on Republicans, when it should be. It's like, you need to appeal to as many Americans as possible, not just the far right. And Donald Trump is starting to feel the pressure. And again, the Fox Propaganda Network is forced to discuss it. And that challenge for Donald Trump is being thrown in their faces, not just by the polls, but also by Nikki Haley.
He can't win independents. He can't win suburban women's. And there's a lot of other Republicans he's not getting. Think about the fact he did not get 43% of the vote in New Hampshire. In the poll yesterday from Quinnipiac, he's down 7% to Biden.
Again, just seeing them have to be confronted with this fact is so glorious, because, the Donald Trump being underwater with women, really any Republican being underwater with women, isn't exactly surprising given what the Republican Party has done and has intended to do and has suggested that they'll do if they take power again. to reproductive rights for women in this country. I mean, think about it. So, they they spent decades trying to, secure, the levers of power enough to stack a majority of the Supreme Court with conservatives who would be willing to overturn a 50-year tradition in Roe v. Wade. They're the dog that caught the car with the Dobbs decision in July 2022, right? That was their big victory, right? Their ideological victory. And it has manifested in electoral defeat after electoral defeat after electoral defeat, the 2022 midterms, the 2023 off-year elections, and potentially even this year as well, because Republicans have lost in ballot referenda on abortion in even deeply red states like Kansas and Kentucky and Ohio, right? It's just a definitively losing issue for them because the American people recognize, even in this wildly hostile media ecosystem for Democrats and the left, even the American people in this situation recognize that Republicans are simply out of touch, and they're not pro-women. They're not even pro-life. They're pro-forced birth, and they have no reason to trust Republicans with the levers of power on that particular issue. As a matter of fact, they have every reason not to. When you have a religious ideologue like Mike Johnson as speaker, when you have Donald Trump, who's publicly bragged about getting Roe v. Wade destroyed by, nominating Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett and Kavanaugh, these three conservative justices, which struck down to Roe v. Wade. And he's even said in previous conversations that he felt that women should be punished for having an abortion, right? The Republicans don't deserve the benefit of the doubt on this. They say, well, it's a states' rights issue. And yet Republicans have suggested that if an opportunity, at least for a federal ban becomes available, they're going to seize it. So bad news for Donald Trump. We'll see what happens. But there's more bad news outside of polling, also with respect to fundraising.
Of course, with President Biden, who, raised a record amount of money, or had a record amount of money that he raised in Q4 of last year. And Q4 of the off year is always notoriously the hardest year, or the hardest quarter to raise money. And he had a very, very, very historically good quarter. So that was significant. So you contrast that with the fact that Donald Trump is not spending a lot of his money on, getting out the vote, on communicating with donors.
But he is spending a lot of money. He's fundraising less effectively than President Biden and the Democrats, but he is, in fact, spending his money. I do want to point this out here real quick. The Biden-Harris HQ, again, continues to troll Donald Trump. Team Biden-Harris Q4 cash on hand, $117 million compared to Donald Trump's paltry $33 million. But you know what? Donald Trump is spending money. It's just not on ads. According to a CBS report, former President Trump's political apparatus spent more than it raised last year, thanks in part to about $50 million in legal bills spent for his numerous ongoing legal defenses across 2023, campaign finance reports filed Wednesday show. So Donald Trump is spending a ton of money on his legal defense. I thought he was a billionaire. Why is he spending donor money on legal defense? I mean, my God, he's so successful. He's such a shrewd and capable businessman. Shouldn't he be taking care of that himself? Very curious. And again, this is something that Nikki Haley is calling him out for pretty brutally.
CNN is reporting today that two of Donald Trump's political action committees spent nearly $50 million on legal fees and ended the year with only $5.1 million in the bank. What's your reaction to that?
I mean, get ready to spend more campaign dollars on legal fees, because those court cases have just started. He's got 2 in March, and they go out for the rest of the year. It is unconscionable to me that a candidate would spend $50 million in legal fees. It explains why he's not doing many rallies. He doesn't have the money to do it. It explains why he doesn't want to get on a debate stage, because he doesn't want to talk about why he's doing it. It explains why he had a temper tantrum, the election night of New Hampshire, is because he wants me out of the race, and he wants to be the presumptive nominee so that all of that cash starts going to him and he doesn't have to spend anymore. But that's a reality of a real big problem for Republicans going forward. This is not personal for me. I don't have issues with Donald Trump. I voted for him twice. I was proud to serve America in his administration. This is about the fact that we have a country to save.
So listen, this is something that, again, not just Democrats are hitting him for, but also his fellow Republicans. Donald Trump right now is a disaster, dangerous to be sure. And there's a serious chance that he could be president again. I don't want to discount that. But this idea that he's guaranteed for the White House or that President Biden is destined to lose, it's just not manifest in the facts. This is going to be a tight, competitive election. And right now, President Biden does enjoy certain advantages. We're starting to see consumer sentiment on the economy shift to align with the macroeconomic data. That's going to be good since the economy is a major issue for aspiring presidents or presidents seeking re-election. And then you have a situation with the fundraising. Fundraising doesn't guarantee you a victory, but it sure as heck helps and strongly correlated. And right now, Biden is kicking Trump's ass with respect to fundraising. And he has no legal challenges, President Biden, that he has to spend donor money on. So this is back-to-back terrible news for Donald Trump. It's great to see that Fox News is either having to report it or it being thrown in their faces by fellow Republicans. It's incredibly delightful for those of us who are sane to watch that happen. Let me know what you think in the comments.